Welcome back to another episode of Sloan Cold Facts. I'm your host, Marcus Sloan. Today we have a special guest, a guy who's been really helping me out. You guys know I'm older. I just turned 40 a couple weeks ago. I'm not as bouncy as I used to be. Y'all got to YouTube me, Google me. Not as athletic as I used to be. This guy's been taking care of me the last couple weeks, get me back loose, get me back flexible. I almost could play in the game, almost. Still need a couple weeks. I'm not there yet. It's my guy, Eric Ramirez, at the CFL Sports Medicine facility in Pearland, Texas. Eric, welcome to the show. Appreciate you coming to Sloan Cold Facts.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So, as you guys know, man, recently, even as recent as, I think, was it Monday when Kyler Murray went down for ACL tear? Mm-hmm. Yeah, like nowadays, man, these athletes, especially at the pro level, but even, you know, some of the kids I see at the high school and collegiate level, like you'll see like kids 15, 16 years old, like tearing their ACLs, tearing their MCLs, Achilles. And when we were growing up, it seems like that was rare for high school kids to like get tears and like season-ending injuries. Even last year, as a kid here in Houston at Episcopal, he tore his knee up twice, athletic kid. And it's crazy, and I'm always like, hey, I wonder, like, why is this happening? How can kids prevent it? And you know, like I mentioned, I started going to Dr. Ramirez's clinic in Pearland, and he kind of like opened my eyes to a lot of things, even injuries to guys like Chet Holmgren, the number 2 pick in the draft, and he kind of explained some things. Eric kind of explained some things to me of like how even kids or even high-level athletes can prevent these things. You know, man, you guys like LeBron James, we've heard before, he spent $1 million on his body per year, $1 million, so he can perform at a high level. I think athletes, again, even from as young as high school to pros, I think sometimes we take or our lack of knowledge hurts us. Even for myself, growing up, man, like, you know, I used to stretch, but I didn't realize the importance of taking care of your body till I was older. And, you know, man, like you'll see guys only have short careers and like, damn, what happens? His body broke down. And Dr. Ramirez here, man, he's been giving me a lot of game. And at his facility in Pearland, he has some things that are next level, some new technology that'll help a lot of people. So I brought him on the show today to kind of talk about what he does, his background, and how he's helping, you know, future athletes and how he's going to kind of change the game of how combines go. I mean, we'll talk about that later, but I think everyone knows how important the combine is, especially with the college football season just ending. Guys are going to get ready for that combine, do all these combine testing. So I'll kind of have them break down some of that stuff. But Eric, man, again, glad you're here, glad to have you. Kind of talk about kind of what you do. Okay. Actually, and just your background.
Okay, so background, I'm a chiropractor. I focus on sports medicine, do a lot of soft tissue work, things like that. Mm-hmm. I got into chiropractic kind of as a secondary thing. It intrigued me when I started dealing with some injuries myself and going the pre-med route and not really getting answers from the doctors when I had injuries that kept me out of basketball, things like that. Mm-hmm. So after a while, I just got really annoyed and did some different things. Some people told me about some rolling on a tennis ball, basically, and I got super annoyed because rolling on a tennis ball fixed a problem I had for 5 years that kept me out of basketball. And it was a runner that told me to run on that whirl on a tennis ball, and all these doctors couldn't tell me. So that's kind of how I ended up in chiropractic. As I went through, I was introduced to soft tissue work, and once somebody did it to me, it kind of just relieved that problem I had. So just been kind of going on a journey through that since then, just really working on soft tissue, really looking at it. In between that time, you know, knowing I could fix these injuries, I was annoyed a little bit, or, you know, some people would bring up questions on, you know, why does this keep happening to me? Why do certain athletes start getting hurt all the time? And so it was a question I was really thinking about a lot. And, you know, one day somebody asked me, they're going to go play ball. I was leaving the clinic. And he said, hey, doc, like I play ball all the time, and I noticed my calf is pretty tight. Like I don't want to rupture my stuff like Kobe did. It was right around that time. And he asked me, like, how do I know? And I was like, you know, that's a really good question. So I looked it up and couldn't really find anything. So I went back a couple of days later and told him, like, hey, man, like we don't really know. Like there's no good information out there. A couple years later, I was reading an article in Sports Illustrated. I saw there was a guy out in California that was doing some stuff with cameras. And I didn't really read a whole lot through it, but as soon as I read about cameras, it just kind of hit a light bulb off in my head. And I realized that, oh man, we can use cameras to see how people are moving, to measure certain things. And then maybe that'll tell me how much load we're putting on a joint. So then I kept practicing doing stuff, and about 5 years later, I finally found a system that would measure those things. And so that's what we use now. So that kind of takes you through, sports medicine background. Yeah. Been involved with sports my whole life. I played certain sports, but I've always watched sports, and I just have an ability to look at people's movement and kind of tell where they're putting a lot of load. And then since I've used this system, I'm starting to get a real good understanding of what bad movement looks like, what too much load looks like, repetitive motion, how it starts breaking down joints, and then it leads to these injuries that we're seeing.
And so, Doc, again, talking about high school athletes first, a lot of parents always come to me, and I hear them asking questions like, how can they prevent injuries, or like, what is too much? You'll see kids, especially AAU basketball, from as young as 9, 10 years old, they may play 70, 80 basketball games in the spring and summer. How much like wear and tear put on your body at a young age affects what like in 9, 10, 11, affects what happens when you're 16, 17, 18?
I think breaking it down a little bit on that question, there was a sports conference I was on. It was like it's an Olympic sport conference. And one of the things that they put on there, it's not necessarily that we need to take these breaks, like a little bit of that, but what we're starting to notice is everybody's getting more specialized. So we know we're going to play basketball early on, and we want our kid, they're showing some good athleticism or skills on that certain sport. So it's baseball or basketball or football. What happens is they start doing that one sport all year long. So that leads to the same movements that we're doing all year, where before we would play baseball, basketball, and football, but we'd have different ones, right? So we're putting different stresses on our body throughout the year. So one of the theories is that since we're specializing in this sport, we're just constantly loading the same joints over and over, and so that gets the wear and tear. It is important to keep remembering to take time off, learn how to recover and those things, but from a young age, to kind of answer that question a little bit differently, from a young age, they really need to start learning how the body's going to move and how to recover and how to be an athlete. And that's really what we're focusing on, is really that, like teaching these kids how to be an athlete, knowing that there's guys like LeBron, who's like our poster child because it came out that he was spending so much money on his body. But knowing that there's guys like that, or even before him, Emmitt Smith, Jerry Rice, these guys that, Jerry Rice famously did ballet and things like that so that he could keep his joints healthy. Emmitt Smith did a lot of chiropractic work, a lot of yoga type stuff. And these guys played over 20 years in the NFL. So Tom Brady has his method that he does really well, and it's based all on recovery and taking care of your joints. So just those things kind of going through. But, yeah, that's what we noticed with those. So basically going back to that question, I have two other questions. So at what age do you guys at your facility start as far as like looking at kids and working with kids? We can
start. What's the youngest you think, or what's the youngest parents should kind of start looking into things like, hey, okay, let's start looking at movements in our joints of our kids?
Yeah. Anytime they're playing a sport. So if you look at gymnastics and things, those girls have to, and boys too, but mainly those girls on their, they have to hit a peak somewhere around 8 to 10 years old. And so we're getting them really young. The only limitations we have is that there's a little bit of a height limitation on our system right now. So they have to be about 4'11" and up. And then the only other thing is with our system and how we train people, they just have to be coachable. So as long as they're coachable, we're good. But definitely by the time they're starting to go, at the latest, by the time they're starting to hit junior high athletics, that's about the latest you want to start looking at this.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. And so my second, I guess, part of the question, do you suggest parents or kids at a young age to play multiple sports? Is that what you're saying? So that it's not as much load management. It's funny because, you hear in NBA and baseball load management, guys taking nights off. Do you think that playing multiple sports at a young age helps prevent, like certain joints getting worn down as opposed to just playing, being specialized playing single sport?
In a way, it's a good cross training. So it's going to build different muscles different ways. Most of the stuff we see is all repetitive, from adults sitting in chairs all day long to, that's churning off stuff, but then students sitting in chairs. So I mean, you can nitpick it like that, but if you really want to focus on that one sport, you just have to do certain things to make sure your body's right. But a good way to do that without having to spend so much effort is, just change it up, cross-train, do different sports, different movements. I think that would help.
And so, again, man, growing up, I'm sure just like you said, I played multiple sports, but I kind of started specializing towards basketball, obviously, when I got to middle school and high school. But nowadays, I mean, you have kids as young as 8 or 9 years old, and they'll be specialized until they're, 18, 19. So that's interesting. The technology you spoke about as far as the cameras, as a high school athlete now, we're talking about, team sports, individual sports. How can you, in your facility, if I were a high school program, a high school basketball coach, a high school football coach, how would you guys benefit coming to our program, working with our athletes?
So what we're looking at is the most benefit is if I get a baseline. So if I look at healthy athletes, what we consider healthy because they haven't been hurt or they're not dealing with an injury, I can identify movement patterns that will be a problem. And there's data that shows that these movements are problems. So we take that information and we want to work with them, give them ideas. Here, you can do this on your own. We have a program that we do to correct those movements. So I think that's the biggest help, is just establishing that baseline. Secondarily, on that baseline, if they do get hurt, whenever we're trying to return them to play, we have a baseline mechanics measurement. So we're not going to release them until they hit that baseline again, because this is what they look like when they weren't hurt before. These are the types of ranges of motion and movement patterns we want to see before I get them back on that court.
And guys, it's funny because earlier this week, I did my own test and just kind of see my range of motion and flexibility. So what he's talking about is, he'll do the test before guys get hurt, or, just like you said, the baseline, and then once they get hurt, he can tell, hey, you guys got hurt here. And you can look at this all based on your technology you have at your facility, correct?
Yes. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's incredible. Also, too, we mentioned earlier, like the combine stuff. Everyone knows, especially in college football, combine, the NFL combine, it's a big ordeal on NFL Network. But at that level, you and I talked about this. You said that there are teams and even organizations that they are missing some of the things that they should have in a combine based on certain technologies that you have and that in your position. Kind of talk about some of the technologies that you think that can add and help players during their process.
Yeah, there's quite a bit to go over kind of on this subject, because there's a part of it that could be a little scary for people coming up, because the technology that I use, and there's other types of it out there, if they start utilizing that more with combine, they're going to be able to tell that you have a certain tendency. Like, hey, look, this guy's a high risk for an ACL tear. This guy's putting too much load on his feet.
And real quick, and so you're saying your technology can show all of that?
Yep. And that's basically what we're looking at. So two ways to look at it. If they start utilizing that and you don't have access to it, you're kind of going in blindly. So you could show up, you got crazy athleticism, but if you fail some of these numbers, then you could slip in your draft, right? Or even if we're talking college, you could not get that certain school's offer. It might be a different school because they're like, well, we got 5 other guys that we can put in that position, and they tested better, so we're going to go after that one. So that's one thing to look at it. It's not really – I haven't seen it being used too much now.
And you're talking about even for, like, college recruiters. So you're saying, like, schools could even come to you guys and say, hey, like, we want to look at these 10 offensive linemen. Can you run them through your program to see which one?
And you'll basically be able to flag any of them that have like, hey, look, they're a high ACL tear risk. And so it doesn't mean they're going to tear the ACL, but there's a high risk of it. It's like, so you're just playing data. Like everything's data analytics now.
Correct.
And so you're looking at that data and you're basically taking it and saying like, yeah, they're a high risk. You're flagging them. So if I had 5 linemen, and they all played, let's say they're all tackles, right?
Yep.
And so if I take all of those and all 5 of them are really close as far as ability, size, and all the things that they're looking for, but then there's one of them that just has a lot less injury risk, and he's probably going to get it, right? And then, you talked about kind of in the combine, you're looking at explosive movements, but there's other parts to it. And I think you mentioned something a second ago, and I kind of wanted to talk about it, was the explosiveness and things that we look at. it's not just that. You said that back in the day we didn't really notice these injuries as much.
Correct.
I do think that our social media
enhances it.
Yeah, we do see
magnify
more of it.
it.
It's so fast. Like basically the Kyler Murray thing.
Right.
A couple minutes after it happened, I saw a bunch of videos pop up.
Yeah.
And so we do see it more. It's kind of shoved down our throats a little more. But one of the theories I have is that we've gotten really, really good at making people stronger, faster, jump higher, that kind of stuff quicker. But we're doing it at the detriment of their joints. So we don't really care about these compensations because we're getting stronger and faster. But what that's doing is it's putting too much load on a joint and it can't handle it anymore. And that's another reason we're seeing all these injuries. And so
not to cut you off, but that goes back to one of my original questions. Is it too much? Is the emphasis too much on bigger, stronger, faster, quicker?
Yeah.
You feel like that?
In my opinion, yeah. Just because I'm going to focus more on making sure you're not going to get hurt or really reducing that risk. But I really believe there's a good amount of maybe not so much compromise, but where we can get in there and do both. We can make you stronger and faster, let you do your explosive workouts. And the way we want to approach that is, if I can make your body more efficient, that means all your muscles are working the way they should. So now you can train harder, and now your coach can kind of ride you. That's what we talk about. They can ride you a little harder throughout the season. But since we've taken all that load off your joints, you're less likely to get hurt. So now you can actually train harder. So that's the way I would try to approach it. Instead of doing these exercises that make us jump really high or make us really quick or strong, let's make all the muscles work. We can continue doing some of those exercises, but now we can actually work out more often, harder. And then, like you said, maybe we don't have to take as many breaks because our body's not just getting torn up prematurely. And so I think that's the way I would like to approach it, is just looking at how to make our body more efficient, how to make it work better, and then have the data to prove it. So now we have this computer data where it's not just the naked eye looking at it, that we have this very objective data that's just like, we have it on the screen. I have the information. You go through and do whatever workouts, programs, whatever it is, and then we do it again. And now I have data to compare, and it shows that you've increased performance and you've decreased all the joint, basically repetition damage and that kind of thing. Yeah.
And so even you could even work with like high school strength and conditioning coaches. And like for like the guys off-season workouts, when guys get hurt, like their, rehab workouts. And so at your facility, do you guys also do that as well?
Yes.
Okay. Awesome. Okay.
Yeah. So we have kind of a proprietary system. I saw a while back when I first got my system. I'd like to send the data out to coaches, to personal trainers, things like that, and say, hey, look, your athlete needs to work on this. And the biggest thing we saw was like glute activation. That's like a really big one. So when we look at that glute activation or lack of, then I want to send it out. Well, if you're working with a personal trainer and your glute activation, their first thing is to think about, all right, we can do XYZ exercise, like squats or lunges or something like that. And that's supposed to activate our glutes. But in this athlete, what we see is they're not activating the glute right. So when they do the movement, they're using compensation patterns. And until you get rid of that compensation, the normal exercise isn't going to work. So what we try to do is go through, and I'm pretty sure this was a question coming up. We can probably go into it more in detail later. But what we try to do is go through and isolate that muscle group, make it work. We force it to work. And then from there, we just kind of go on our program and keep going.
With the high school kids, again, just kind of sticking here for a second, especially guys who are individual sports, tennis, golf, where they are pretty specialized even in high school. What would you suggest parents of those student athletes, even those student athletes themselves, like how much maintenance on it, or maintenance work would they need? Obviously basketball and football are more, they're physical sports, they're more violent sports, and more contact. But for the quote unquote non-contact sports, even you look at Tiger Woods now, he's kind of going through injuries and, he's been in golf his whole life. Right. So what about the individual sport athletes? How could they benefit from your program?
A lot of like movement issues with them. I mean, it's the same sort of movements, and they're actually a little they actually benefit from this maybe a little better as far as a performance standpoint, because when you get everything moving, the swing gets really good. So if you look at golf and tennis, it's just like throwing a ball. So quarterbacks, baseball swinging, softball swinging, all those things. So they can benefit from that way. But if we look at non-contact, what we're really dealing with is repetitive motions. And so all those sports have repetitive motions. And that's really where we want to look at. So any sport we have, you're just looking at the repetition of it. So where they can benefit is like identifying that you're not activating a certain muscle group, and so your hip's not following through, you're not getting your swing out and all those kind of things. And so that's really where they'll benefit from it. Very similar. Yeah, they don't have the same wear and tear on their body from like the physical standpoint, but it still is physical. It's just in a different way. So kind of going there, like recovery is a really big deal. So even besides like the data that I can get, everybody needs to learn how to recover. And so the program does have a lot of recovery in it, and teaching athletes how to recover at home and how to do their things on their own, because it has to be done on your own.
I think that's important. The recovery piece. Like I know a few years ago, everybody was Cairo, like getting a cold tub, like getting the machine. When you talk about recovery, especially in a sport like basketball, where you may have a game Tuesday and a game Friday, but you have practice Wednesday, Thursday, what's your recovery time, or like what should the recovery look like? Let's say a parent or student athlete wants to come to work with you guys. What does that look like as far as recovery?
There's different ways. Like if you're doing it on your own, at the very least, we're looking at foam rolling. So, a lot of people ask me.
Love the foam roller.
Yeah.
Love-hate relationship for sure.
Yeah. At the beginning, everybody hates it, and then it becomes your best friend.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, the foam roller, man, my trainer when I was in college, TCU, Chris Hall, C. Hall, he was the first person to introduce me to a foam roller.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, what does this thing do? He was like, just kind of roll on it. It'll massage your almost like giving you a deep tissue massage.
Yeah.
So I'm like, let me try this. And so like it hurt. Like, when you first get on the phone roller, you're like, wait a minute. But once you get comfortable doing it, it changed my recovery, and it helped me get loose, helped me stay loose. So that foam recovery, I have a love-hate still, but it definitely changed like my outlook, and it changed my like physical ability to bounce back for sure.
Yeah. I think, the foam roller will get in on that tissue, and kind of going back to that soft tissue work that I said I do, we're working on something called fascia. And so that fascial tissue will get adhesions in it. It starts to get stuck. And so when you activate a muscle, that basically that fascia at that layer, there's 3 layers, at that layer, it surrounds the muscles. And when you contract against it and it's dysfunctional, then it's going to create that pain, right? So that's how I'm able to get rid of pain so quick, is we break up those adhesions. And so the foam roller will help maintain that. So as long as you don't let them get like to really hard set adhesions, the foam roller will keep those adhesions out. So that's a really good and cheap way to do.
And is this an everyday thing, you think, or like
pretty much?
Okay.
Yeah. If you're training that hard and you're competing that hard, you can do it every day.
Foam roller.
Yep. Foam roller. And then if you had to choose between stretching and foam rolling, go foam roll.
Oh, really?
Yeah, especially at a young age. I feel like the stretching, we talked a little bit about the warm-ups that I saw the basketball guys doing at the tournament. When you're stretching, you have to do it a certain amount of time. Like you have to allow those stretch receptors to release.
So, Doc, what's a proper stretch time? Because like for me, like in the morning when I go to the gym, I may stretch for like 10 minutes. Now, when I was in college, our athletic trainer, our strength and conditioning guy, he was like, you shouldn't stretch cold muscles. Is that true?
In a way, like in a certain way. Like you never want to take a muscle. See if you remember this. Like if you talk to older people, like maybe my parents' generation, maybe your parents' generation, if you tell them to stretch, you'll see them bounce. Like they go and they stretch and they kind of bounce a little bit. So every time they're bouncing, they're basically taking those receptors and they're tightening them. It's like a little bit of a protective mechanism. And so if we look at that time, you really want to go about 15 seconds at the least.
Per stretch.
Yep.
Okay.
And then hold it. But you really want to go about 30 seconds if you can.
Wow, okay.
And so as you do that, those receptors will release, and then you're actually stretching the muscle tissue. You'll feel it kind of, it's almost like it's melting. You'll start moving a little bit more as you hold that stretch. So yeah, I would go 15 to 30 seconds. And then, going back to the stretching cold, in a way, warm up a little bit so everything just moves a little better. And that's really how you do it. And you can kind of do foam roller for a warm up and then stretch after that.
So for again, inexpensive, I guess, recovery is foam roller. What are some other options people have as far as recovery goes?
Those guns, the guns are pretty good.
I see those. So kids have those.
Trying not to do all the name brands, but there's guns everywhere, right?
Correct,
so it's just basically a percussion gun. That's, those run the gamut as far as pricing. You can get them as low as like $30, $40, and then the really good ones or the name brand ones are, $300-$400 sometimes. I'm trying to think of anything else. I mean, there's so much, there's floss bands. You can put those on, but you got to kind of learn how to use them. You can do cupping on your own and just kind of like do something and move around, get that blood flow back in there. Ice baths, ice bath is
that's what I used to do in Europe.
Is a thing to do, but going back to the cryo, like cryo is it's a different mechanism, but it's going to be a lot more beneficial than just ice bath. But ice bath is there.
And so, like, again, for an athlete, especially in high school recovery, if they were seeing you 2-3 times a week, would that be sufficient for them?
Yeah. So really, the 3 times a week would be if there's something going on. Like, hey, I pulled a hamstring, I got something hurting in my hip, my Achilles, something like that, right? So we're dealing with an injury, we're treating it. Twice a week is kind of what we do as our baseline therapy treatment. Right now, if we're just doing maintenance, maybe once a week. It depends on the age. If we're talking high school, if there's not a lot going on, I really don't need to see them that much. It's just, we try to train them, get all the problems out, right? So that's separate. Let's just say that's taken care of. I really could see them like maybe twice a month, once a month, that kind of thing, just to maintain them, keep them loose, those kind of things. Now, recovery could be different. If you want to use us for recovery, once a week, you're doing at least once a week, and then you're still doing stuff on your own. Yep.
So the high school kid I was talking about who tore his ACL twice, he comes to you, you get him kind of like what you did with me with the camera. He does the jumps and the movements. And from there, you would set out a plan for him as far as to get his knee stronger, what he has to, I guess, work on in his legs also, because, once you're down, obviously, like you said, other parts of your leg compensate for the lack of strength in your knee. So how long would you have to, or would a kid like that be, I guess, in a program? Is it a 6-week thing, 8-week, or would it just kind of depend on the individual?
Yeah, it depends on how much you want to get out of it. Right now, we're mostly doing 6-week programs, but to be honest, the reason I'm doing 6 weeks is because most people aren't really up to date on what we're trying to do. And so whenever I go to talk about it, they're not ready to hear that, right? So even at 6 weeks, they're giving me a little bit of pushback. If I had my way, I would work 3 to 6 months with an athlete, because we can fully start to integrate our stuff, watch them grow through it, watch that strengthening happen, and then keep retesting as we go. But I would really, really like to get to that 3 to 6 month mark. But we start at 6 weeks. Okay. That's a bare minimum to like start to get some changes. And now you kind of know what you got to do, and then you do it on your own at home. But I would love to have more work. I mean, it's like any training, right? You go to the gym for 2 weeks, you're not going to get much out of it.
Right. Yeah. So going back to the combine thing, NFL combine again, it's a huge deal. When guys are getting ready to test vertical, you know the 40, the vertical, the bench press, things like that. If an NFL agent comes to you and says, "Hey, Eric, I have 7 guys. Can you now? What would be the difference between you getting them ready for the combine, or can your company and facility, can you get somebody ready for the combine as opposed to sending them to a strength and conditioning coach? What would be the difference?
Without like stepping on toes or doing anything like that, I think the biggest difference is my main focus is going to be to stabilize you as an athlete so that we're not getting hurt, but also get those results, right? Where strength and conditioning, assuming that they don't have any kind of insight into what I'm doing or anything like that, their main focus is just get you faster, stronger. I want to get that broad jump further. I want to get your 40 down. I want to get a bit of bench more, and those kind of things. And so, where they might run circles around me on the bench part, because I'm not going to do a whole lot that goes with bench, right? But you're not really going to get hurt on bench. I mean, every now and then you might tear a pec or something like that. But the rest of it, I can get you there, but you're going to be stable. So if you do a broad jump and they got you another ½ inch over what I got you, but when you land on that broad jump, your right knee's going in and it's torquing in, and with mine, it's not. mine's the way you're supposed to land.
Correct.
Their way is not the way you're supposed to land. And so that torquing, that's torsion. That's the torsion that, like Kyler Murray, that's the kind of stuff you see. So you see that torsion just happening over and over, and eventually it's going to pop. Yep. And then whenever we get into going to talk about that, there's like there's a term, and I'll just say it now. Non-contact ACL tear.
Right.
Those are basically what we can identify.
Yep. So again, I told Doc this. People ask me all the time, Sloan, you gonna play in the league? Gonna play with us? We need you. We need a big Sloan. You want to play? People DM me on social media, and I make people laugh. I am not playing any basketball ever again. Maybe every now and then I'll play for the TCU alumni weekend, but other than that, I'm not playing basketball. And a big reason why is one of my good friends. Well, now two of them. Alvin Brooks III. He's a coach at Baylor. Our best friend, or one of our good friends, Aaron Proctor, he got married. And we were both in a wedding. I was the best man, and AB was he was one of the groomsmen. And so he walked in a rehearsal. He came in on a scooter. And I'm like, yo, what the hell happened to you? He was like, man, I was playing basketball with the managers, and I tore my Achilles. And I'm like, how you tear your Achilles? So he told me the story. He's dribbling up and down the court. He said he got a rebound. He turned to go plant to dribble, and he said it felt like somebody kicked him in the in the ankle. He said he turned around and looked and see who was behind him. He thought somebody kicked him. He said, look, no one was behind him. And he kind of grabbed his ankle, and he was like, man, my ankle feels funny. I'm gonna find out it was an Achilles tear. So the guy I'm talking about. So once that happened, I saw him. He told me that story. That was, I think Proc's been married at least 4 years. I haven't played basketball since. I'm terrified. And then, ironically, I got Proctor I'm talking about, assistant coach at Lamar. He and the staff at Lamar, the coach decided to play in a little pickup game. Same thing for him. Coming off a ball screen, buckles. He screamed, hey, who threw that ball at me? My ankle. No one was there. Was like, what are you talking about, dude? No one threw a ball at you. Towards Achilles. So I am terrified. So let me look in the camera. All you guys asking me to play, I'm not doing it. Even with Doc's help, I'm not doing it because I'm terrified of an Achilles tear. So Doc, kind of talk about that. Like guys, especially older than late 30s, 40s. Even you said younger athletes, even with Kobe and KD, like they have these sometimes non-contact Achilles tears for basketball players. How prominent is that, and what are some of the things that can prevent it? Some of the things you guys can help prevent that?
Yeah, those are still tough. You're telling that story. It's funny because I was looking up on the KD stuff, and it was the same thing. Like when his happened, he turned around and looked, and it's like nobody there, right? They're always confused, like what happened? And then when they were talking, I think Reggie Miller was talking he was commentating that game, and he's like, man, that's the same thing Kobe did. Like he turned around, like who kicked
no one
me?
was there.
And then so it's a little worrisome for me too. I used to play basketball, not at your level for sure, but just for fun, and I don't want to play anymore either. Same thing. Like when I jump a lot, or even when I'm running, my Achilles gets tight. Two of the things that we notice is ankle range of motion. So especially what we call dorsiflexion. So that's where your toes are coming up towards your knee. We'll start to get more restriction there. So it doesn't move as good. And it's kind of natural as we get older, especially if you played sports. The joints will start to lose their range of motion. So that's a big part of what my system will tell me is all the different ranges of motion of the joints. And I think we saw yours, right? And so we'll see a big imbalance. Like let's say the left one has a 48% and then the right one has a 10%. Right, so now I know the left one, like that 48% means it doesn't have good range of motion. And if we couple that with some bad biomechanics, like we're not getting glute activation, we're too much on our quads, that means that everything goes to the quad and the glute never did anything. And then from the quad, it trickles down to the Achilles, the ankle, those kind of things. And so if you put together that bad ankle dorsiflexion and that bad mechanics where you're putting too much load, that's probably the best indicator we have. So when we see those things, for a young athlete, we can still do quite a bit for that ankle range of motion. For yourself and myself, we're starting to lose time on getting that ankle range of motion back. Anybody like in their 50s, you're not getting a whole lot of that range of motion back anymore.
So what? So like, there's nothing we can do? You think?
Yeah. for yourself and myself, there's still some things we can do, and we can probably play. And there's really good exercises out there that talk about like keeping it supple. Like basically, it's a rubber band. You got to keep stretching it like a rubber band, keep some tensile load on it, and those things. Some of that's true. I mean, I see some of the workouts, and I'm like, I don't really know about that one. But without diving into each exercise, there are some good things out there that you can do to kind of keep that tendon able to handle that kind of load. But just really work on that range of motion. You can get it. It just takes a lot of effort, Like we only do a certain amount, but we really teach you what you need to be doing at home so you can start getting this range of motion back. And then just, trying to get that thing longer and then change your mechanics. Try not to put so much pressure on that Achilles.
Yeah, no, that's something now, I'm going to start working on with him next week just because I eventually do want to play again. I'm absolutely terrified of an Achilles tear because I've seen so many guys my age and even a little bit younger tear their Achilles playing basketball. And so it just makes me nervous. But Doc, he's insured me on some of the things that could possibly, help with that. So, again, also too, we're going to touch on the Kyler Murray thing, but he and I talked a couple of weeks ago about the Chet Holmgren thing.
Yep.
And man, Chet Holmgren, if you don't know, was a star at Gonzaga, 7'1", 7'2", second pick in NBA draft to the Oklahoma City Thunder. It was a debate. Some people thought he should have went 1 based on what he did in college, based on his potential, his skill set. But Doc here said that, it was a reason he went to. Doc, kind of touch on that about here in the Orlando Magic and their thought process going into drafting Chet Holmgren.
Yeah, so I don't have any like insider information. I just kind of in passing, I heard it probably as I was scrolling through videos or whatever, I heard them talk about I believe it was a podcast. Anyway, I don't know who it was, but they basically kind of mentioned that a little bit, like, there's some data that possibly the Orlando Magic had that kind of let them know that he was going to have an issue with his feet. And then sure enough, he's missing his whole rookie season now because of the injury in his foot.
Right.
And they talked about Yao Ming and stuff like that.
Right.
Yao's was obviously just the dude played all year long and he was giant, right? So his body can't handle that. But in Holmgren's case, there's something that they saw. So I don't really know what system they use, but I can imagine it's something similar. Somebody had some sort of thing, and even if they didn't have him show up and do a specific test for them, they probably had something or somebody that was watching his game footage. And when they see it, and then they kind of just look at his mechanics and his build and things like that, and they're like, hey, over the years, this is what we're looking at. Guys that are built like that, like Bol and all these guys, like they have issues. You look at all the giants in the league, and most of them have some sort of foot problem or knee problem, something like that.
And so, Doc, from your eye, you can watch a player, watch an athlete, and you could tell that also just by watching them. Hey, this kid might have foot problems based on how he lands, based on how he runs.
You can, like any therapist, a lot of chiros, things like that. People that really specialize and look in the mechanics, we'll all sit there and tell you like, oh, I can look at it with a naked eye. So if any PTs or chiros look at this and they specialize on that, but they don't have the system I have. They'll probably maybe even make comments like, oh, I can tell that stuff with a naked eye. Well, I used to be able to do that too. And with the data I have now, it's sub-millimeter.
Like you have analytics to back you up now.
Yeah, you're not looking at it. Like if I'm seeing 2.5 degrees of torsion in the knee, you're not seeing that with the naked eye.
Yeah, for sure.
You see like valgus, you see a little bit of movement, but you're not measuring it. No quantitative data, right? And so having that data is a big deal. But you can look at some of the motions. Like I can see people playing, and you can talk about, oh, there's a pronation in the foot, so that's bad range of motion and things like that.
And so with Chet Holmgren, let's say they brought him to you, put him through these tests, and so from your system, from your analytics, you could have told, or you could have seen on that test, hey, this kid might have foot problems based on this.
Yeah, whether we would have isolated his foot being the problem or not, I'm not sure. It probably would have been more than knee, just because you can see a lot of that in there. But yeah, it's an important question, because what we're really trying to tell people is there's a baseline and then there's a sport specific, right?
Yeah.
Everybody wants the sport specific. So that's why I got the high speed cameras now that I can look at your batting, I can look at your throwing, and even if we did basketball, I can look at box out, your jump form and all that kind of stuff, because we can go frame by frame. But the baseline is where it's at, because any sport, anything you're doing in life, if I look at your baseline and it's off, that's your foundation. We have to start there. We got to fix that first. And if we fix that first, then we go from there. So I'm not sure we would have isolated his foot. Maybe if they asked me specifically, I could have been like, yeah, I mean, obviously that could be a problem. But we would just look and be like, he needs to fix this, and that's going to trickle down and fix the rest of it. You know, we're usually going glute, core, and how those interact together, and then that kind of trickles down the whole lower extremity from the waist down. Yep.
That's interesting, yeah, because he and I talked about this maybe last week, and I just thought that especially guys getting ready, especially like these NBA franchises, you know, such a big deal with these lottery picks, especially in basketball, because it's so rare to build a franchise and get a franchise guy. And then when you get a franchise guy like Chet and he goes down with a season-ending injury, you know, it's one of those things. It's like, could this have been prevented, or what could we have seen in his history, in his analytics? And as everyone knows, man, from the high school all the way to pros, analytics are kind of running the sport now, especially in basketball and baseball too. Everything's analytics. NBA guys are hiring analytic guys as GMs and front office people. And so the technology you have is the same. It's analytics of the body, which in turn is just as important as his statistical analytics on, you know, what he does on the court, or shooting percentage, or you know, how he plays. So I think people, you know, need to understand how that the analytics of your system can really like change the dynamic of an athlete.
Yeah.
You know,
I mean, we're talking about stats. Your stats are 0 if you're on the bench hurt.
Yeah.
So
for sure.
Yeah. So it's that kind of is more important than those other stats. Once people start realizing that, it'll be more important. We didn't hit on something that I thought was pretty important on that last one. We keep talking about the guys that, you know, showed these injuries. There's one really important guy. He's talked about every day in the NBA. That's Steph Curry.
Yeah.
So he had bad ankles coming out, and that's why his draft stock went down. So I don't know if you remember that story.
That. Yep.
Yep. So he actually worked with someone. I don't know exactly who he worked with. I meant to look it up a while back, and I never got around to it. But he worked with someone that knows what they're doing, because he had a lot of ankle issues, and I know he plays with braces and stuff like that.
He does.
But he's had like maybe one ankle injury in his career, and like you see what he's doing now. And that was one of the knocks against him coming out of college, was he had those ankle issues. He had like with glass ankles or whatever.
Right. Yeah. Weak ankles. Yeah.
Yeah. He worked with someone that that really learned that stability and knows what they're doing. So whoever Golden State has, or whoever he hired on his own, they know what they're doing. So that's that same type thing. Whatever he was using, I'm not sure how he looked at his his data, but he knew how to fix the problem.
He fixed his ankles.
Yep.
Yeah. Eric, I talk about the Kyler Murray non-contact ACL things again. Like I mentioned earlier, ACL tears are so common. It's crazy. You hear about a kid even in high school tearing his ACLs twice on non-contact stuff, coming down on a rebound, or like Kyler, he was running for a first down and just kind of like knee buckled and he fell.
Yeah.
So like a lot of times people say that those non-contact ACL tears are worse than the contact tears. Is that true?
In a way, like you can't really prevent it. So I was an offensive lineman way back when, right? And so the things that you would see, and not at my level, that didn't really happen to us, but going into high school, especially college, NFL, stuff like that is, if I'm engaged in a block and then another lineman just comes, got a 300-pound guy rolling on you, not a lot you can do about that. I can stabilize you all I want.
Yeah.
You just can't be in the wrong place at the wrong time,
Correct.
right?
Yep.
But there's a couple of stories to go into. But to kind of answer that question, I don't really know if it's worse or not. It's just, I guess it's worse in a way that is preventable. Like the non-contact is preventable. The crazy stat that I was able to pull up a couple years ago, 70% of the adolescents, so these are like all the kids that play sports, like through grade school all the way up until senior year, right? Man, I can't remember how many, but it was in the thousands, right? How many ACL tears we have per year nationwide. 70% of those were non-contact. So that means 70% of them, we could have done something to minimize that. Maybe you don't prevent all of them, but you can minimize the chance of them happening. 70%, that's a lot.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then, so kind of going back to what we were talking about, if we were talking about the contact versus non-contact, right? So contact is that, like, you overload it. There's not a lot you can do. The joint can't take that kind of load.
Yeah.
Non-contact, it's the way you're moving. It's your biomechanics, and they create that. So you talk about his knee didn't really do anything, but then it buckled. it actually didn't really buckle that much. There was a guy that slowed it down and showed maybe a little bit of anterior translation, which that's what the ACL prevents. What we're seeing, though, is torsion. So if this is the femur, this is the tibia, right? So this is your lower leg and this is your big leg, or your thigh, right? So in here, there's an ACL. If we keep having this torsion, it's taking your ACL like that, and it's just pulling it and pulling it. Over time, it's going to weaken it, it's going to irritate it, and it's going to get weaker. And then pop, it goes. Yeah. So we've actually, just to talk about a quick story about that, the second ACL tear that I predicted, there was a kid that came in. It wasn't even for his knee or anything like that. His older brother had seen me. He was a quarterback in my area. His older brother had seen me for a tight hip. The dad brought the younger brother because he was due up to be the next varsity starter, right? So the second kid came in, and I had just gotten the system. I didn't have it for the older brother. So I worked on his hip, and I was like, yeah, it's a little bit tight. You know, we'll loosen it 2, 3, 4 times, and then it'll be good. Yeah. And on the way out, I was like, hey, I got this new system. It's really cool. You should check it out. So the dad was like, all right, cool. We'll check it out. So I scanned him, got done, was looking through his stats, and I was like, ooh.
Now, how old was he at the time?
He was probably a sophomore. So he was probably 15.
15, 16, okay.
And then he could have been a junior. Yeah, 15, 16, right? Okay. So he's in there. We did the test. I look at the numbers, and there's like a specific number I'm looking at with that knee torsion. And it's supposed to be below 2. And his was at a 9 point something. And so if you look at a 0 to 2 scale, a 9 is like
off the charts.
Yeah, way the heck up there, right? So and
real quick, Eric, yeah. Do you know why his was a 9? Was it because of how he trained? Was it because of how he walked? Like what?
Yeah. So this kind of goes to what we do. So the best way I can answer that without going like a whole hour just into that is the things that we do on a daily basis will create our imbalances. Yeah. No. So
real quick, everyone knows I'm always on my phone. If you see me, I'm like this. Like look at the phone. About 3 months ago, like I started to feel like a pull in my neck and my shoulder. I'm like, God, why did I have a crick in my neck? I didn't sleep wrong. And so, but again, I didn't change anything, you know? And so I went to Doc, I went to Eric, I went to his facility, and he told me, he was like, you have a posture issue. I'm like, how does my posture, maybe this was a dumb question, but how does my posture affect, like if I have a crick in my neck? I mean, he was like, how do you know, what are some of your daily movements? I said, well, I'm always on the phone. I'm at the computer like this. And he said, that's your issue. And so it's kind of going back to what you said. It was like, it wasn't anything I did like physically with the weights or anything. It was just my everyday habits of looking down at my phone, looking at my iPad, looking at my phone like this the whole time. It caused tension here and pulled on my neck. So yeah, I didn't mean to cut you off. It's just like you said, the daily habits of
daily stuff. Yeah. Daily stuff, yeah. So if we look at that, what we're seeing now, that's a really good one. That's like the majority of what we see from up here. Man. Yeah. Yep. And then from the lower extremity though, which is where all these mechanics really matter, kind of, right? Yeah. So when we look at that, what I can give you a good picture is we're talking about students mostly, right? Correct. So we're sitting in the desk. The desk has one side that you get in and out of. Yeah. So that means one set of muscles is doing one thing and the other one's doing the other, but they never flip-flop. So they're always doing opposite things, but they're doing the same thing every time. We get in and out of the car the same direction. We sit on the couch the same way, like leaning to one side instead of the other side. This is where all those compensations matter, right? Or where they come from. So when you ask like, why would it be a 9 or a 9 point whatever, it's just whatever he's been doing. That side, one side got stronger than the other. It continued to get stronger as he started to train. And then now we have these imbalances and it creates this torsion, right? And so we saw his torsion. I told the dad immediately, I was like, man, look, I've only had one person higher than that. And he was a basketball coach, but he was also MMA. And so I told that guy, like, hey, quit playing basketball with your kids because MMA is important. He had like one match to win, and he was supposedly going to get called up to UFC. Yeah. That was on a Wednesday. His fight was on Saturday. Came back in. My assistant at the time was a friend of his. And then I was like, hey, how did what's his name do at that fight? He's like, man, he tore his ACL in the first round. Damn. On an MMA fight. And he was just throwing a kick. So it's like he got kicked in the knee. He was throwing a kick, ACL tore. And I was like, dang, this thing's crazy, right? Like I predicted that thing, or it predicted it. And then so when I had that quarterback, I was like, man. And anyway, I told him some stuff. And the kid was like, I have turf at the clinic. And he's just like playing in the grass. And then like he's not paying attention. And then so I looked at the dad and I was like, hey, I don't really know how to get your attention on this. I was thinking in my head. So I was like, look, this is how it's going to go. So I got up out of my chair And then I pretended I was a quarterback, and I was like, all right, what hand is he? He's right-handed. Okay, cool. So he's going to come out of the pocket. He's going to be getting chased. And then he's going to, like, step to try and move. And when he makes that step, he's going to tear his left ACL. And then
you told the dad this.
Yeah. And so they didn't listen to me. That was that year, right? So the next year, he's a starter. So he goes through that year. He's JV or whatever. And next year comes along. He's a starting quarterback for varsity. His brother had already gone off to college. On the third game of the season, he tore his ACL. Yep. And I found out because the dad came to see me at the end of that season because the dad's back went out. And at the end of it, he was like, hey, Doc, you're kind of weird. Like, you're able to predict that. He's like, it's exactly what you said.
That's crazy.
And I was like,
and you saw it because of the system.
Yeah, like I basically saw that number and I knew you're at a high risk of an ACL tear.
And now, could you have helped him and he still be able to like practice and work out too? Or would it one of those things where he would have had to stop completely what he was doing just to focus on that knee?
Yeah, most of the time they're going to continue practicing. You're going to continue doing what you're doing.
Okay.
If I see a number high like his, I'm going to really warn you. But you take that risk. It's up to you. I can't tell you for sure when it'll happen. I can just tell you that you're at a higher risk, right? And so, we can do my program. It's designed to do it, and you keep doing what you want to do. Everything, my treatments and all that, they're designed to keep you doing what you want to do, and that's kind of how we try to do things. If we see a pattern where like it's just not getting better, or you keep having pain every time you go play or practice, that's when we start cutting back a little bit. But for the most part, we're trying to keep people active, and we don't want to mess with their strength and conditioning stuff.
Right.
You do ours, you do that, and then you put them together, and it works. Yep.
Doctor, anything other with your system that you want to kind of touch on, like expound upon?
I guess one of the things we didn't talk about is like how quick it is, and then kind of one of the trademark things is I don't have to use markers, and so we're a markerless system. So I guess there's a few things we didn't say. As far as Texas goes, UT has a system. They're not really using it the way I am. They're using it for their kinesiology research type stuff. I'm not sure how they use it for their athletes, but anyway, it's not available to the public. So as far as I know, from the last time I checked, I was the only one in Texas that was offering it to the public like that. Wow. There might be one other facility, but it's not. So
you're
here.
one of you're arguably the only facility in the state of Texas that offers the technology you have on athletes, basically.
Yeah, and the technology isn't the only thing. Knowing what to do, it's kind of like an MRI. If I get the MRI, you got to have a good surgeon that knows how to fix the problem that they found. Or if I see it, it's not a surgical thing, I got to know how to rehab that so that it's not bothering you. So if I look at this data, just having the system is one. Like, it's really good, it's accurate. You got to know what to do. You got to read it. And then you got to know how to have a good plan to fix it, right? If you want to make a change to it. So that's one. What makes this system very different is it's markerless. So you stand in it like you did. I didn't have to put any of those white dots on you.
No.
Like some people know the white dots from movies and games and things like that. So we don't have to do the white dots on you. So I can run a scan in about 10, 15 minutes, where a lot of those other ones can take hours to do. Not hours, but maybe like an hour or so. And they take more staff. And, I can just do it with one staff. So it's really quick, very easily repeatable, and so that's what makes it so good. Trying to think if there's anything else on there. Not really. I mean, just the data, how quick it is, and just how easily we can get that data and use it.
And people can pay for your services with insurance as well and out of pocket, correct?
Yeah. So I guess that is an important thing. It is FDA cleared, I guess. So there is a billing code for it. So we try to bill it. We use it as part of our total program, though. So if we want someone, or if someone wants to come in and just do like a really in-depth, then we have a package for that. And it's going to include all the DARI scans with it. If someone wants to come in and have me work on an injury, we're going to do a scan just to kind of see where that injury came from once we're able to do those kind of movements. And we try to bill it to insurance. So everything we do is either insurance or we're doing a package because you want to go above and beyond.
Yeah. And basically, just real quick, just so what the scan is basically, they have cameras all over. I just did it literally 2 days ago. They have cameras, all like a bunch of cameras, and you do jumps, you do stretches, you do different things. And I'll let Doc kind of expound on that. And like the camera captures you doing all these things, and then it spits out the data, the data of what you just did, and like what areas need to be worked on, what area. I mean, literally my explosiveness, my athleticism. What else, Doc, did it show? Something to show
athleticism, explosiveness, functionality,
yeah.
joint dysfunction, joint vulnerability. Those are our main, like, as far as graphs go, sliding graphs. Those are the main ones that we look at.
Yeah.
But yeah, it gives us a lot of information, and there's about 30. I can't remember exactly how many because I don't use all of them all the time. But I would say between like 32 and 35 total movements that are in the system.
Oh, wow.
And then we do a baseline. Our baseline one is about 17 movements.
Okay.
But there's others that we can use. Like if I saw something that's going on with your spinal range of motion, there's like 3 or 4 other ones I can throw in there because I only do one on the baseline. So I can throw some other ones in there and kind of get that information that I might need.
So you can be very specified in that also too. Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, so if we see other stuff with the jumps and all that, I'll have you do more balance and more jumps just so I can get more data and I can get a lot more in depth. Yep. I think that baseline is very important. So like I said, 17 movements, we go through them pretty quick.
Yeah.
We get that data, and then once we have it, we give you information on it, and then we can make custom ones. We talked about combine stuff. Yeah. I can make one that just has certain movements in it, and we do like five movements. Boom, we spit out combine numbers. Like this is what you did on that jump. This is what you did on the lateral jump, your vertical. This was your squat depth and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, so we can look at all those things. I think going with basketball, the 3 jumps that we have, the vertical, the concentric, and the drop jump, all those are very beneficial. The 5-hop, all those things will tell me a lot what's going on with the knee. And then you can kind of go from there. Like I think something that we haven't hit on too much is the sport specific. Just from a basketball standpoint, even if a coach wanted to just go frame by frame on a person's technique on how they shoot or how they go up for a shot, we can have everything, the angle that this is, because we have 8 cameras, so I can see the angle of the elbow. I can see where their release is. I can see where it is in relation to their shoulder, how their back is, all that kind of stuff.
Oh, wow.
Yep. So like we can get a whole lot more detailed into it once we have that opportunity.
Yeah. No. So you guys, his facility's in Pearland, right off of 288 and 518. If you guys are familiar, very very accessible, very easy to get to from Sugar Land, Missouri City, Pearland, even South Houston, kind of going to Pasadena area, because you can hit the Beltway and get on the 288. But, Doc, we appreciate you, man. Is there anything else you want to let the people know? We'll put all of his information in the YouTube video, and we'll put it also on our streaming stuff, audio version. But, Doc, anything else you want to let the people know?
No, besides I obviously like to really talk about this stuff. So if anybody wants to reach out, ask questions, they can contact me. We'll have all the contact info.
We will.
Other than that, man, just, take advantage of it. Like this technology is available now. We make it very available for anybody to use. We're not catering just to pros. I want everybody to use this. I want the youth to learn how to treat their bodies right so that they don't get messed up, because sometimes coaches are looking at winning and they have to win because they have pressure, and your body's at risk, and it's your body. So learn how to take care of yourself. You can still perform and get those results and then not get hurt, and then you can keep going, go to the next level.
Parents, I'm using a product. I strongly suggest you guys take a look at this. Like I said, we'll have all the information. It could change your athletes' lives, even parents, former athletes, guys like my age in their 40s and 50s and late 30s. It can change your life too. We don't, we're not in our sport anymore. We're not maybe at that certain level, but everyone knows health is wealth. You see guys and people leaving here, heart attacks and different ailments and have different issues, and they're not as mobile as they used to be. And we can prevent that. I think Doc's facility, with his technology, again, it's helping me become more flexible and kind of get my body back together. So I'm very appreciative. And again, it's like you said, it's for all levels, from youth all the way up to pros and former pros, and even people who aren't pros. If you have injuries or you want to recover or you want to see what's going on, why is your back feeling a certain type of way? The technology and his wherewithal and the staff that he has and his knowledge that can help you get back, back to 100% or as close as possible. Dr. Eric Ramirez, I appreciate you, man. Thank you for joining Sloan Cold Facts.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you for having me.
For sure. Sloan Cold Facts. We out of here.